Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. And my name is Corey Webb, and I'm the Marketing Director here at Turn Zero. And I'd like to welcome you to our webinar titled Champion Scalable and Sustainable Growth Through the Power of Customer Success. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you that we are recording today's session, and we'll be sending out a link 24 hours after this webinar. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to submit your questions via the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And we will get to as many of them as we can during the Q&A portion at the end of this webinar. Now, I'm pleased to introduce to you our presenters today. We have two speakers joining us from ValueWise, which is a premier customer lifecycle consultancy that helps drive leading tech companies to drive best-in-class net dollar retention. We're excited to have Emily Ryan join us, who is their Chief Client Officer, and Tony Diarra, who is an industry principal at ValueWise. Through decades worth of combined experience in customer lifecycle management, together they blend strategy, design, and operations expertise to maximize the value delivered to their customers, the companies, and the communities that they serve. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Emily and Tony, to kick off this presentation.
Thanks so much, Corey. Nice to have everybody joining us today. As Corey mentions, ValueWise consultants work with leading B2B technology companies to create and translate customer value into unparalleled net dollar retention performance. We are honored to work with top-tier technology companies, including Workday, VMware, HashiCorp, and many others. Put simply, we're working hard to reimagine and define the customer lifecycle of the future. By applying these standards that we've defined in our value experience framework, which we'll highlight briefly and throughout the session, so you'll get kind of a taste of that, we form a best-in-class foundation for each of our clients. ValueWise's consulting team provides the expertise required to understand and integrate the unique aspects of your company and your customers into your final solution. We translate your customer lifecycle strategy into an operational model that will drive the right action at the right time with the right customer. Through a data-driven approach, we leverage automation to routinely measure and continuously improve the impact and efficiency of your customer lifecycle strategy and organization, maximizing impact, efficiency, and scale. As you all know, the long-term success of your business and your ability to drive market-leading net dollar retention depends on your company's ability to retain and grow your current customer base. As the value center of your recurring revenue business, customer success plays a crucial role in powering this growth engine. To unlock the potential of this organization and maximize adoption, retention, and expansion, you must view customer success as a true revenue engine and empower them with the investment tools and resources to effectively drive sustainable growth. So today, we will delve into how leading enterprises drive net dollar retention through strategic operations. We'll talk about customer success lead qualification, or CSQLs, and we'll talk a little bit about the very dense and deep subject of digitally enhanced customer engagement. As Corey mentioned, be sure to jot down any questions you have along the way. We'll answer as many as we can toward the end of the session.
Great. So we're going to talk a lot about NDR today, and specifically in this first topic, we're talking about driving NDR through CS strategy and operations. NDR is very central to ValueWise and the focus that we take when working with our clients, as Emily mentioned. We're so passionate about this that we actually created a framework that supports this called the Value Experience Framework. What is great about this framework is it really puts net dollar retention at the center with a bunch of competencies leading up to and supporting the achievement of that high net dollar retention. We've de-siloed these activities so that they can be supported by any role in the organization and any department in the organization. And that's really because customer success is the responsibility of the entire organization. And so we built the VX framework to support this. As I mentioned, it's comprised of the disciplines and supporting competencies required to achieve that high NDR. And if you're interested in more detail, we have a white paper that is related to this, which is linked in the slides. So you'll get the slides 24 hours after. You can click right in there and have access. But we also have additional content on the ValueWise website. So we've got a webinar that's related to the ValueWise value experience framework that can break it down a little bit for you as well. And what's really critical to net dollar retention and this value experience framework is the support from operations and the criticality of that. So operationalizing not only the strategy, but the technology as well. So I'm going to pass it over to Emily to delve a little bit deeper into that for us.
Yeah, as Tony mentions, we've de-siloed this VX framework across the disciplines you see here. But that doesn't mean that the disciplines don't align with your customer journey. What's crucial to note is that by removing the silos, removing the specific departmental orientation, it becomes even more crucial for operations and scale teams to function end to end across each of these disciplines. As we've seen with most of our clients, and honestly, most of the companies within the industry, marketing and sales operations are not really questioned. Yes, there might be tight belts that impact operations first, but in general, it's pretty clear to businesses how marketing operations define segments and scale outreach. It's clear how sales operations drive efficient pipeline conversion. The investment makes sense in business. But we see a continuously anemic investment in customer operations today. Customer operations is responsible for all of the motions on this slide besides acquisition. All of the adoption, retention, and expansion happen because of seamless customer operations. All of those motions are the crucial element of net dollar retention, which doesn't include new business. So to drive leading NDR, you must invest in customer operations to ensure expansion with your whole client base at scale. Operations, though, can't function without a connection to strategy if you really do intend to drive net dollar retention. When we think about the word operations, often we'll think about the tactical output of this function, like data analysis or system administration or process creation, change management, and the like. But at the end of the day, if those tactical outputs aren't connected to and driven by the strategy of your organization, you'll have a business that's just completely disjointed from its maximum potential. I go into great detail regarding the qualities of a strategic operations leader in our Customer Value Cast podcast in our season 2 opener, if anyone's interested in learning more about that interlink between strategy and operations. We always talk about how important it is during the sales cycle to set up value-based outcomes and ensure they get passed over to the post-sales team. A key component of value experience is the definition and agreement of value with customers, but this cannot be a one and done thing, only discussed during the initial sales motion. Value experience relies on consistently revisiting value and outcome delivery with your existing customers. So by employing a process like customer success qualified leads, or CSQL, you're consistently able to uncover value that is discovered during a customer's journey and re-engage the sales engine to define, agree to, and capture that value with existing customers. Tony, I know this is an area you've had experience developing. Tell us a bit more about CS qualified leads and how our listeners can think about employing this at their companies.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really love what you said on one of your previous slides about how marketing and sales operations really are not questioned, because they're not. And neither is the investment in marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. So if you think of CS qualified leads in the same way, you really need a framework and a similar investment in the process, operations, and accountabilities to run that CSQL program. So what is CSQL? Well, in order to achieve that high net dollar retention, you need to expand your existing customer base and obviously renew that existing customer base. And CSQLs really are the best way to capture and do this. So that CSQL is going to be that lead that is generated by your customer success team. And what's really great about CSQLs is they have a lower cost to acquire and a faster rate of return for the customer. And a lot of that really is centered around the fact that your CSMs are having these regular conversations. They are, ear to the ground. They know what's going on. And as Emily mentioned, they're talking about value all the time. So once value is achieved, they can start the conversation about what is the next piece of value that this customer can get. And when you think about that, yes, it might be something within the existing pack of services or software that they have, but it may need something additional. And the CSM is uniquely qualified to, you ask any CSM, they're going to say like, I'm kind of a salesperson, but not really a salesperson, in the sense that they are constantly selling ideas and solutions and those solutions to problems. And sometimes those solutions are strategically do this. And sometimes those solutions are, but you're really going to buy this to do that. So having that trust there is really important. And that really fits into that lower cost to acquire and that faster rate of return. They also have a higher close rate. And again, this is because there isn't as long tail of a need to qualify, because that qualification is already happening in the relationship just by the nature of that relationship and by the nature that they already are a customer of your product. So there already is that interest, that investment, that symbiotic relationship of we want value for you and we want to get value out of this product. So how can we make that work together? So again, CSMs, they have that relationship to understand those pain points, those problems, those needs, and to be able to prescribe value throughout the relationship to then determine when there are leads that might need to be sent over to sales to nurture and further close. The CSM also has that knowledge of the customer organization and environment. They're connected with executives, decision makers, end users, and champions, really unlike anybody else in your organization. So they have that power to really get to the crux of, there's white space here in this account. There's another team or department that might be able to leverage this, or they're working with that decision maker or that buyer on a regular basis and understanding what their strategic priorities are and are able to line up your solutions. Again, maybe it's not buying a different level of it, but maybe it's usage, maybe it's more licenses, depending on how your product is structured. So really implementing that framework requires a high degree of collaboration, trust, and partnership across the organization. You are building a process that includes CS, it includes marketing, and it includes sales, each with their own defined roles and responsibilities, and those are going to be key. So sales and CS leaders really need to align on what those roles and responsibilities are to create a culture that includes that proper feedback loop and to make sure that there are no missed opportunities. So understanding what is that handoff point? Again, think very similarly to what a marketing qualified lead is as it goes into the sales team, or when your business development team is qualifying a lead and shipping that off to a salesperson. There's a lot of mechanism behind that. There are SLAs, there are degrees of what does that qualification look like. There is certain information that needs to be passed over. So you need to consider all of that as well and support it very similarly to how you're qualifying those leads in those other areas. So CS needs that process to identify, so that sales can close. Marketing has an involvement because they're marketing directly to customers, or if they're not, that is certainly an opportunity for your business. But they also share insights with the CS team about customer behavior, so a CSM can further qualify opportunities. Think if you're a CSM and your marketing team tells you, hey, your buyer at this customer has attended every webinar about this new product we just launched. Well, maybe they haven't said anything to me about their interest in that, but I'm certainly going to bring that up to them now so that we can start to talk about that. And it really helps push that along. And again, it also does depend on where ownership is within your organization of upsell and expansion, but layering all of these points into that and having that lens as you build out that process is super important. And again, the last thing I'm going to leave with on this slide before I go on to my next one is that, think about the CSM also having that access to that large pool of potential leads. So they really need that same level of support and collaboration within the organization as any other lead qualifying department. So marketing to help the CS team fill their funnel, sales to close that funnel, and then product is involved as well to align development to customer value and customer need. I mean, that exists outside of CSQL, but even more important during CSQL, because think about the feature requests that customers have. Think about, the bugs and the challenges they might have with the platform. Those are often holding your customers back from wanting to do more, or they certainly can be. So product needs to be into this equation as well.
Absolutely.
Next slide. So one thing to be really conscious of here is CSM scope creep. So implementing CSQL may seem fairly straightforward, and it certainly can be in certain elements, but that CSM scope creep is something to be very aware of. So your CSMs, they're still CSMs. They are responsible for creating value with your customers, ensuring adoption, guaranteeing renewal, owning that relationship and really being the customer champion. So adding that sales component can sometimes point a CSM in the wrong direction. If you think about what might be that shiny thing or related to that compensation, and I'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So you need to make sure that you're keeping their focus on the key elements of the role while adding in the priorities of generating new revenue for the business. So you'll want to think about that when shaping CSM behavior related to this. You're going to want to incentivize your CSMs for the right outcomes, whether that be monetary or other within your organization, but not to over-index in a way that is going to prioritize selling over customer value. Both critically important, but it is incredibly important to retain those customers so that you can actually sell to them, right? That's all part of that NDR equation. CSMs are very good at wearing multiple hats. Your whole CS organization is. So just as you need to be aware, for example, that you don't want your CSMs to turn into frontline support when they start helping people solve problems, you don't want them to necessarily become tactical support. You also don't want them to become salespeople either. Not that there's anything wrong with either, but they are CSMs. They have that responsibility of driving value. If that gets a little shaky, it can erode customer trust. You don't want your CSM, you don't want to feel like your CSM is purely there to sell to you. You want to kind of sneak that selling in the side door. So it's important to find that balance. So I've seen that balance done in a couple of different ways. And this relates to, on the compensation side of things, but also on the measurement side of things. So the first one is giving CSMs a soft quota of a number of leads that they need to generate per quarter. So you want to think about this from the size of their book of business and the white space within their accounts. If you have a CSM who has 3 to 5 accounts and they've all been sold through pretty hard, you obviously still, there's always going to be opportunity in there, but it might be different from somebody in a lower segment or a growth segment. So you want to be conscious of that and make sure that, there isn't some resentment within the organization, because that is something that I've seen happen as well. It needs to be properly fitted so that it's achievable and, like I said, fair across the team. And you can apply a bonus structure to this. You can, think about ways that you want to compensate on this, but having that soft quota is something that gives them something to align to and measure towards, but not necessarily penalize them if they don't hit it. You can also compensate CSMs with a percentage of expansion or upgrade revenue. So this can either be for any revenue added to their book of business, whether it was generated by them, by marketing, by sales, or for only leads that they themselves opened. And you're going to need some extra process in here, and you're going to want to be careful with the change management as well, because you don't want competition at the customer of who talked to them about something first and who closed the lead. So I personally, if you're going down this route, think that having a percentage for any expansion or upgrade revenue within a CSM's book of business to count towards them. And you can do this with like a 2 or 5%, depending on the deal size, the margins of your company. But again, keep in mind that the cost to acquire is much lower for CSQL. So you have some opportunity to work that in. And even if the CSM is not the person who directly opened the lead, if it is generated from marketing or if it is generated by sales, the CSM has been championing that relationship for months, years, whatever that may be. So having that value attained, having that adoption and usage go up, all contributes to qualifying and getting that person, that customer, to the point of having that lead generated. So even if they don't do the fingers on keyboards clicking to open it in Salesforce, you'll want to think about compensating them that way as well, or including that in the measurement in some way. The last one that I've seen is giving, and this is also common for account managers from what I've seen as well, but giving CSMs a number that they need to end their quarter with. So let's say a CSM starts a quarter with 100K of business that is renewing within that quarter. You could say that that CSM needs to end their quarter with $110,000 of revenue. So if they renew all 100K of that revenue, they only need to upgrade or expand, an additional 10K. If they churn 10K and they've only renewed 90K of that revenue, well, then they need to close upgrade or expansion of 20K to then land them at that 110. So again, you can really think about your incentivization here from a monetary perspective in there as well. But that's also a nice way to say, you might have CSMs who are really, really strong at retaining business, but are not as comfortable at growing business. That is their opportunity to say, well, I don't need to charge forward as much and over-index as much on the selling component because I'm securing all of this revenue over here. So it finds a nice balance when you do it that way as well. So that's one way to consider also. But what's really important across all of this is that collaboration across teams and ensuring that there is accountability for those responsibilities. If you're going to put revenue and emphasis on revenue for CSMs, you need to make sure that they have the support that they need to be able to be successful. And again, thinking about how you support other teams within the organization that are responsible for qualifying leads from a data perspective, from a roles and responsibilities perspective. You want them to be able to do this easily and efficiently without being trained salespeople, because again, their priority is value, and that value sometimes comes with a selling component to it. So again, partnering on these outcomes, and this is where I hand it back off to Emily, partnering on outcomes can really make this successful for your organization. And actually, before I hand it off to Emily, I'm going to introduce our next topic. So underpinning everything in the VX framework is scale. So Emily, I know you talk a lot about this and a lot about digital engagement. We have many webinars, we've got blog posts, we have all this content relating to digital adoption and engagement. And it's something that we're hearing from all of our clients. And as we talk to prospects as well, this is a really big item. We were talking to a partner this morning who was very focused on this as well. We have competencies related to this in the VX framework, but would love to hear from you about those specific pillars and how you get that done.
Yeah, it is true. I do talk about this a lot. And in fact, I'm partnering with our CEO at TSI World Conference in a few weeks to discuss the future of digital. So this topic could easily be several hours by itself, but let's just dive into the quick version. First and foremost, scaling through digital engagement is not just about email. Your entire customer ecosystem should have elements of digital engagement at scale. And the objective is to integrate these systems and talk to your users how and where they need to be engaged. So by unifying what we call a customer value hierarchy. Now, I guarantee you've got at least two of these. They probably don't talk to each other. You probably haven't coordinated the language around them. But I guarantee your marketing organization has what we would consider a customer value hierarchy. What are the strategies and initiatives that your customers or prospects are looking to achieve? And what are the use cases that your product solves these pain points with? That is the customer value hierarchy. Your marketing team has a version of that. It might not go super deep. Conversely, your product organization probably also has a version of that, starting from the use cases and the feature functionality and procedures and tying that back up to initiatives and strategy. So if you actually work to combine those two views of your customer ecosystem into that one unified value hierarchy, your end-to-end customer engagement can be anchored in value from marketing and thought leadership content through your support team's knowledge base and into your digital adoption guidance ecosystem. So this is another key and critical point. A lot of things on this slide might feel very familiar to you, but having a digital adoption guidance resource space is an often overlooked but crucial to scale component. These content are in the voice of your CSM, and they guide your customers through use case realization without too much technical jargon or admin speak. So it's written in common language for your users. And from that digital adoption guidance, a lightweight yet value-adding email journey can be developed. And you can also engage your customers in your application itself, right? A little bit more product-led to further engage your scaled customer base. But this also supports your high-touch CSMs as well. So every digital touch point within your customer's experience should be connected. Whether you're sending marketing material for new features, you're ensuring services engagement is going well through maybe a survey or a touch point via email, you're tracking adoption wins, possibly through your actual product telemetry, or you're driving advocacy and tracking that as well. These touch points tell a very valuable story about your customers' engagement with your entire brand and your ecosystem. And they can be so insightful when stitched together that they create valuable inputs into a digitally automated health scoring system. And this is really where you get a ton of value, is by anchoring your digital engagement on top of that clear customer journey or that value hierarchy, and adding on that data-driven insight from your product, from your touch points, your engagement with your whole ecosystem. You can begin to engage your customers systematically and allow them to respond to your digital motion, which triggers further human engagement. Whether you're connecting to your smallest customers, your noisiest customers, or your high-touch customers digitally, you can gain efficiency and scale through a well-designed, data-driven digital motion. ValueWise recognizes that scale and sustainability are only possible by employing a digital customer adoption model. It's so important to us that, as Tony mentioned, we actually have 2 competencies and a full discipline devoted to this outcome for our clients and their customers. So to learn more about digital customer adoption in this discipline, you can access our resources on our website at valuewise.co. So with that, it's always crazy to me how fast these sessions seem to go, but I think we were able to set a lot of context out to all of you. Now's your chance, start typing. Corey, do we have any questions for the final part of the session?
Yeah, I would like to invite everyone to go ahead and submit your questions via the questions tab at the bottom of your screen, and we will go through as many as we have, and then if we have some time, we'll give you time back in your day. We do have one question that came in, and I know ValueWise is focused on B2B, but the question says, do you see a difference in growing your CSQL with B2B and B2C customers?
Yeah, great question. Admittedly, my experience is all with B2B, so I haven't done this at B2C, but I think you could definitely employ the same principles. Again, it's going to depend on how the org is structured and how you're prioritizing based on things like deal size. I've seen this at B2B2C, which again is pretty much the same as B2B, but I haven't seen this specifically for B2C. I don't know, Emily, if you have any thoughts based on any experience you have with B2C to kind of lens in here.
Yeah, something that's interesting in the ecosystem today is we have a push for customer success at the B2B size and scale companies. And there's starting to be this sense of maybe we need customer success for B2C. My personal professional opinion is that most B2C companies don't actually require much in the way of customer success unless they're B2B2C, which is what Tony illustrated. The reason for that is actually product-led growth. And
You spit out of my mouth.
I did. And so B2C has the benefit of directly engaging end users, those consumers of the product. And so they tend to have both a more streamlined user experience that is clearly defined during the marketing and customer journey. But the product itself is what's engaging those users and really starting to find opportunities to get them to expand, or if you've got a freemium engagement in B2C, it helps them to unlock that trapped value in your product. There are obviously likely dozens of folks on those customer operations teams building out those engagements with the product organization, but it's not technically a CS qualified lead. It's more a product qualified lead in B2C is my experience. It's a great question, Maddie.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for giving your points of view on that. We have another question that says, we're struggling to navigate the relationship with CSMs and sales. Have you seen a CSM role that actually closes the deal for upsells? We created an account development role to manage upsells, but it's become a confusion for the roles of the CS team and our customers.
Yep.
Yes. So I have seen it. I have worked it as a CSM. I have led it as a leader. And it can work. It is more challenging, I will say that. And it does create some tension internally, and it can create that confusion for the customer. If your organization is dead set on staying in that accountability, where CSMs close the upsell and sales is responsible for only net new, you have to really define that line. If not, and it's kind of a mix, that is challenging. And if you are going to have that mix, consider, and I'm going to go back to compensation, but you throw money at the problem, sometimes it works. But think about double spiffing while you go through that change management, so that there is not competition while people are figuring out how the wheels work and how the motions work. But I would advise, my recommendation, and I believe Emily's is aligned with this as well, is having CSMs qualify and submit those leads for the salespeople to go ahead and close. Because otherwise, you're also getting your CSMs involved in contracts and, you know, all of the mechanics of closing stuff in Salesforce, and, you know, you're directing them away from what is the most important, which really is value. And again, dollars that might support the customer getting value, right? Increasing that investment so the customer can have value. That's my opinion. I don't know, Emily, if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I actually did a webinar with a chief revenue officer about this very topic, which is, you know, do blended sales and CSM accountabilities work, and how and when do you pull in really a renewals function? I'm right there with Tony. I acknowledge that there are often transitions that companies need to go through or choose to go through that may muddy the waters there with customer success. But at the end of the day, think about what are the crucial jobs that your team members need to be doing, and why are they doing those? Customer success exists because of the B2B subscription economy. We found out that when we don't just sell you something in a big lump sum, you, the customer, don't have as much incentive to drive your own value. So when we switched you to subscription and you can drip feed us your money for our product, now the onus is on us, the vendor, to show you how valuable that product is, because switching costs for you, the customer, are super low now. Customer success was born to fix that challenge and to create a safe space, a sort of Switzerland inside of your company that doesn't have direct allegiances to selling you something, and also shouldn't have direct allegiances to fixing broken things. Your CSM organization should be focused on driving value. And if they're not, what are they really? Are they a very expensive support organization, or are they a very cheap sales organization? And you've got to be honest with yourself about that. I would recommend evolving the organization to have a renewals team member. Depending on the size of your organization and the number of renewals, you can probably add just one if you're a relatively lightweight company with very few transactions per quarter. Usually a great renewal sales rep can get through 100 to 200 transactions a quarter, and that can help you also with your upsell motion. But I do recommend keeping your CSMs pointed at driving value realization with your clients and your customers, because that's the thing that they were intended to do.
Awesome. Thank you both for those answers and sharing your experiences there. Yeah, I mean, I agree that if anything, like whoever owns the ownership has ownership, like the role clarity needs to be there. And for the sake of the customers, as the question pointed out, they need to know who to go to. So thank you for that. We have another question that says, what are the biggest pitfalls you see in CSQL? What are some ways you've seen types of organizations work better in, sorry.
It's okay.
I guess let's just say, or any pitfalls you guys have seen in implementing CSQL?
Yeah, for me, it's been that role clarity and the change management. I mean, it is a big shift for everybody. So making sure that there is that clarity, that people are engaged and understand exactly why and what and the benefits and all of that. And if you really are aligned organizationally on the mission of high NDR and really rally around that, this is how you get there, right? And so those are the two things that I would say, if you're going to do this, is the accountabilities need to be there. The ownership and the responsibility needs to be there. And the change management really needs to be there. I know that's kind of a quick answer, but those would be my three things to focus on.
Yeah, and I think that the incentivization model, and Tony gave several very, very good ones. One of my favorites, especially in smaller organizations where you kind of need to make sure that anything that's renewing within the quarter renews, like that's table stakes, right? And honestly, that should be your product team's metric if we're really getting into it. The product should renew the customer. The CSM should ensure that the customer is seeing so much value that they expand. And so finding the right model to incentivize that without steering your CSMs off the course of driving value, I think that's the biggest opportunity to stumble and fall if you shape the wrong behavior.
Makes sense. I think this question is along the same lines of things we've been talking about, but it's asked, is it okay for an AE to be the owner of the client while CS only offers training and runs integration and configuration of the product for the client? This is a recent change in my company.
Ooh, the word owner is always a funky one for me anyway. So when we talk about ownership, and I know exactly what you're talking about, it's so funny. Our language matters so much, right? The owner of the customer is your company. No one on your team owns the customer. The company owns that revenue, owns that customer, owns that relationship, and as a whole ecosystem is accountable for that customer's success. So that's just a asterisk pet peeve of mine, but I hear you and what you're trying to say here. I would say if your CS team is only doing training and doing integration and configuration, they're a professional services team that may or may not be paid accordingly. Professional services is a crucial and valuable team, but if your CS team is not relationship managing and is not unlocking trapped value for your customers, then they're not a CSM. You didn't mention CSM, you said CSS. So it's possible that this is a services team, in which case the sales and services model, that's an age-old model. That's the model that we've all grown up with, quite frankly. Sales and account executives managing the relationship ongoing while there is a services and support branch is a perfectly fine functional model, but it is crucially not customer success. It's, you can call it customer success because everything should be wrapped around the success of a customer, but it's not CSM specifically, technically.
Awesome. Our next question is on compensation plans. So the question is asking if you have any recommendations for credible sources or source data in helping to develop those compensation plans for an organization.
Yeah, we all come from and have years of experience across our organization ourselves running these programs, and then we work with customers and we learn from them, and we develop positions based off of that. But we also work very closely and are partnered with the TSIA. So we get a lot of best practice information, knowledge and statistics from there, and that's really where we base a lot of this. So I would say if I was going to refer, I would say the TSIA would likely be a good source to get some additional research. But Emily, I don't know if you have anything else to add there.
Yeah, that's exactly where I would point folks to. Tony should write a blog post as well, and you can look out for that in the future to download some of the things that we've seen personally on the ValueWise side. But we do use TSIA customer success as a resource for gathering a lot of information. Their whole job in life is to poll the world and see what the trends are. So that's a good resource.
Awesome. We also have some blog posts on the Churn Zero blog that break down some frameworks or recommendations for different compensation models. So I recommend checking out both resources. We have a question that says, our biggest hurdle right now is adoption. Suggestions on how to emphasize the value of our product and ease the adoption process for a robust SaaS company.
Oh, let's see. So Tony knows exactly what I'm going to say. So first of all, let's make sure that we have a unified understanding of the word adoption. So a lot of the time, companies synonymize product usage with adoption, and product usage is a very important component of adoption, but it is not equal to adoption. I tell my team and my clients fairly regularly that the word adoption is a great word for what we are doing in customer success management to drive adoption, because the word adopt in the definition has the word choice in it. So if you think about adoption, adoption is not just usage, right? I can tell you, you have to use, I don't know, Salesforce.com. You have to use that product. Well, okay, well, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use it because I was told I have to, because I have to check these boxes, whatnot. But if I say, I'm going to take away Slack in your ecosystem, now you're going to say, no, I use Slack. I get so much value out of that. I engage with my team, my friends, my colleagues. That's where all of my stuff is. That emotional response is the difference between I am just logging in to use this product because I was told to, or because it's part of my job, and adoption, which means I personally, the user, am getting value directly from this product. And so when we try to measure adoption, we should be considering not just the usage, which is an indicator, and low usage is often correlated with low adoption. but figuring out what else in your ecosystem, again, going back to that digital engagement, how are your users tuning into your webinars, right? Churn Zero has a great understanding of adoption based on all of you showing up today. That is a marker of your value that you get from this ecosystem. How do you engage with support? Are you a regular engager? Do you have high will to learn the product, or high skill to learn the product? Do you engage with education resources? So if I'm suggesting how to emphasize value in your product, it's really, and I might just flip back a couple of slides here. It's really the, let's see, this one. It's really all of these components. It's making sure that you have ready access to a thoughtful support ecosystem, including a knowledge base that's driven from customer inquiries. That technical documentation, that's critical. How do I actually use the product? The marketing and thought leadership is part of your adoption of your product. That's exactly what Corey is here to do today. The external engagement, so your CSMs engaging with your customer, your professional services engaging with your customer, your sales organization engaging with your customer, education, all of that, and that digital adoption guidance. So speaking to your customers in use cases, in human language that anybody at their company can understand, and helping them understand how to unlock value. Doing that stuff and integrating it into your product is another great way to drive adoption through product-led methods of doing that. So there are a number of readily available products that will help you engage your customers directly in app. And really just the adoption process needs to be a well understood thing. We have another competency about organizational change management. How hard is your product to adopt for your clients? The harder it is, the more robust your change management focus should be from either your services team, your onboarding team, and or your CSM organization. I hope that was a little bit helpful. I know there was a lot in that explanation, but it's a great question, Devin.
Yeah, I certainly think it was. Thank you, Emily, as well. We have a question that's asking about dividing up CSMs or teams. I think the question is getting to like sales. It might be based on region. How do you recommend going about grouping CSMs if they're owning expansion?
Yeah, lining up with what your sales org is doing certainly makes sense, but also think about how are you scaling your team and how are you making that fairness and opportunity and workload kind of consistent across the board, and aligning that with the skills of the people on your team based on, perhaps seniority or areas of expertise. So, you could think about that by breaking it by customer segment. I'm not going to use segment names, but small, medium, large, and whether that's based on the size of the business or the size of the white space or the revenue or whatever it might be, but you could break it down that way. I have seen it done by region. I have seen it done with a bit of a blend, but more of a blend at the enterprise level, where you are breaking down enterprise by region so that you are lining up certain enterprise sales teams with certain enterprise CS teams. And you can also go by vertical as well. If you have certain CSMs that might have a specialty, might be able to speak to a certain audience because of their background, their work experience, and even just having the commonality between their customers can really help as well. So that's a tough one to answer. It's really gonna, I hate, it's such a non-answer to say whatever makes the most sense for your business, but any of it can really work. But I would say bring that lens to it of what is going to, one, create consistency, what is going to enable your team best, and what is really going to support and create value for the customer in the best way. And all of that can change as you grow and scale. So if you start one way, you certainly can adjust over time and say, you know what, it's consistent across the country or across the globe. which it probably won't ever be. But so we feel comfortable going with that model. But, I mean, I've worked at a lot of B2B tech, and it's like the West is huge growth because of Silicon Valley and all of high tech. And then the East is high, and you've got all of our finance and pharma and all of that coming out of there. And then it's the people in the middle that can sometimes get, a fewer slicing of clients. So making sure that there is consistency there and you are supporting them, I would say, is the best lens to take. But Emily, if you have anything you want to add.
No, I think you touched on the key points that I was going to mention, because as a startup looking to organize, you will revisit this as you grow multiple times. So just embrace that. It's also the most important thing that we do at ValueWise is we look at what does it look like to your customer? What does your customer need to get value? And then backing into the jobs to be done to achieve that value for your customers. And then slicing that up based on, to Tony's point, your CSM ratios should be based on how much of an effort it is to do all of those things for those companies. A lot of the time we see smaller, earlier stage startups start with that sort of small, medium, large, as it pertains to active revenue coming in the door. But another method is potential revenue to come in the door, right? If you have a small account with a very big name with a lot of potential, you might give them a higher touch. But really starting with what drives value for your customers, backing into jobs to be done, doing a model to understand how much time and energy it's going to take for your CSMs, and then assigning accordingly. One CSM group that all customers go to can be fine to start. It does depend on how many customers you have and what they actually need. So once you start to get above, I'd say 20 customers per CSM, and this all depends on your product, you're going to end up really eroding that CSM's ability to directly impact value. So you're going to want to get digital real quick.
Awesome. Thank you for those answers. This might be our last question for us today, but when do you recommend rolling out a CSQL model? Early on when the company is just adding customer success, or later down the road once you show value with a CS team?
Great question. I definitely don't think that it requires waiting until there is value in what the CS team is doing. I mean, certainly the quickest you can get to understanding that across the organization, that certainly should be something you should be championing. Having the support of an organization that understands and values customer success really is critical. So starting that from the infancy for sure do. But as far as pulling in the CSQL framework, I would say think about where the skills are needed most and where your customers are and where the size of your business is. Because from a scale perspective, you want to keep things, fairly clear. And, I will also say, thinking about where, not just where the CS team is in the journey, but where the sales team is in the journey as well. And I can say, and, kind of another point of to consider is, I was at an organization where the CS team was really responsible for CSQL and really bringing that far down the line. And then the pandemic had hit and the sales team was like, well, we're not getting net new deals, so we want to sell into your accounts. And that was great, but it was really disruptive for a little bit. And so thinking about that when you are early in your growth as a company and your scale as a company is, what is the sales team really prepared for? What are they best suited to be doing? And, what is the complexity of what you're selling as well? It might make sense to keep that relationship with the salesperson for a little bit longer of an overlap. But, it's never too early to start CSQL if it makes sense for the business based off of role, accountability, and making sure that you're not over-indexing or flooding people with too many responsibilities.
Yeah, that would be my main thing to watch out for, because I agree I would say there's no wrong time to implement that, but ensure it's not a distraction from the things that are crucial to your CSMs. And you can be pretty lightweight about CSQL, and you can even implement just bonus targets against, I think it was the final model that Tony recommended, right? You are accountable for this much revenue this quarter, and that can be either you retain all of your customers plus a small amount, or if you churn somebody, you have to make up that amount. And that type of bonus structure can be kind of a gateway, gentle into CSQL without it being too taxing.
Awesome.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, thank you so much, both of you, for sharing your insights with us today. And I want to remind everyone that we are recording the session, so we will be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides that you can view on demand and share with your colleagues. At the end of this webcast, you'll see a survey pop up, and we'd appreciate if you would just take a moment before logging off just to complete that survey to provide your feedback for us on today's webinar. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.